if you have a question. And thank you for the land acknowledgement, Rosemary. I have another an additional land acknowledgement that I read out at the last unit meetings, and I'd like to do that again. Many public gatherings in Pierce County begin with a land acknowledgement, stating we're meeting on historical home of multiple Pacific tribes. Tonight, I believe it's important not only to acknowledge the historical fact that this land was occupied by indigenous peoples for thousands of years, but to acknowledge the vast difference between their concept of land use and ours. The indigenous cultures understood themselves as living in an intimate relationship with the plants and animals around them, one of mutual benefit. Taking plants, animals, and materials from the land and waters is done in gratitude and leaves one with responsibility to give something back. Let's begin this meeting on biodiversity conservation in Pierce County land use by opening our minds to such a relationship. And I did want to also let the group here be aware that my inspiration for organizing this unit event came from reading the Montreal 2022 United Nations Conference of the Parties, COP15. And the goal called for 30 by 30, which means, and these are scientists who have said that in order to meet the undeniable threats of climate change, humans need to identify and protect 30% of the world's land and waters for biodiversity conservation by 2030. It's that goal setting thing. So the speakers I've invited throughout this week provide important information to consider in achieving this goal for Pierce County. And so this evening, I've invited County Councilperson Robin Denson, also from the Pierce County Planning and Public Works and the Sustainable Resources Department, Nicole Avendaño, and Eurydice Pence. And then from the NGO point of view, I've invited Naomi Alhadeff, I hope I'm pronouncing that all right, joins us from Missoula, where she serves as the Regional Educational Manager and the Montana Project Wildlife Education Team Coordinator for National Wildlife Federation. So she's got lots of hats on, as does Nicole Avendaño. She's the Equity and Engagement Associate Planner in the Office of Resilience and Climate Action. Her work focuses on engaging and involving community members in greenhouse gas reduction. In her previous role, Nicole worked with a creative reuse nonprofit to lead community and school-wide initiatives to reduce waste through artistic endeavors. And Eurydice Pence is the Sustainable Building and Transportation Planner in Pierce County's Planning and Public Works Office of what's called now ORCA, Office of Resilience and Climate Action. She has a diverse professional background that includes residential property management, small business ownership, and more than a decade of public service in education and local government sectors. So we've got lots of expertise to join us, but I think, I'm not absolutely sure, feel free to contradict me, but I think we'll start with Robin, who serves on the county council. But before then, I knew her a long time ago when the watershed I live in, Crescent Valley, was involved in a bio blitz of what kind of animals do we have, what diversity we have. It was identified by the Department of Fish and Wildlife as being a biodiversity management area, and the PPW, PELS then, helped write a stewardship plan for us, and we went forth and worked on those projects, also helped by National Wildlife. And so she began her political life on the city council, and she's done lots of service for the community, including land conservation. So Robin, did you want to begin with what you can tell us about the big umbrella of land use management?
Yes, and can I share my screen with a PowerPoint?
Yes.
Okay. That was my plan. Oh, here it is. All right. Let's see, share. All right, let's see here. It's gonna share. Oh boy. Can you guys see that?
Yes.
Hold on, let me just try one more time because I want to share it as.
I was gonna say we can see your notes too.
I know, I'm terrible at this.
I know. Can you do slideshow and see your own notes?
I think I have to do the slideshow first and then share it. I'm sorry, just give me 1 second. Let me open it up again and hit slideshow. Although I might need to see my notes. It'll be okay. And thank you, Lucinda. While this is coming up on my computer, it's taking a minute. Just want to thank you for all of your work in our community on conservation and environmental issues. And you continue to work so hard on that. I know Lucinda reaches out frequently. Oh no, this is taking a minute. I don't know why this is not opening.
Well, at the same time, you know, I'll nudge Rosemary and say, hey, and Rosemary sends a beautiful letter as well in support from the.
All right, you know, I think I'm gonna have to
if you had
with
gone,
my next one, and then I think, okay. So I'm gonna run through some quick introductory slides. All of you, seeing who's here, I'm gonna go through this really quickly because you all know me, you know the county. Sometimes I'm dealing with an audience that has no idea what the county does, and I like to take the opportunity while I have an audience to educate them. So as Lucinda said, I have a long history in a variety of areas, but I've always loved the environment and conservation ever since I was a kid. So I actually started on the Gig Harbor Parks Commission, was on that for like 15 years before joining City Council. And in addition to helping found the Gig Harbor and Key Peninsula Land Fund, which I did when I was on City Council, now I'm on the Alliance for a Healthy South Sound, Whisper, the Ecosystem Recovery Board. I was one of the founding members of Harbor Wild Watch. So this is just a personal love of mine. And on council, I'm kind of the go-to environmental person, although everyone on council really appreciates the environment. Well, I would say 6 or 7 of us really appreciate the environment. Okay, so here is Pierce County. I just like to show people how big it is from the Key Peninsula all the way to Mount Rainier, Bonnie Lake, down to Yelm. It is enormous, and a lot of it is unincorporated, so we have a lot to do. Many of you are from District 7, so whether you're from North Tacoma, Ruston, Gig Harbor, or the Key Peninsula, there's a very different communities, and so we've got a lot of different park districts, a lot of fire districts, school districts. There's a lot going on, so it's a wonderful, wonderful district. These are just some of our roles. We have a lot of roads we maintain. The big part of our budget is actually law and justice. We do land development services, which we are going to talk about tonight, as well as human services, parks, emergency management, elections, tax collection, economic development, and more. So we are very, very busy. Our budget really reflects our values, all of those things I just mentioned, and I'm going to be doing some town halls coming up later this summer so people can tell us where we want to put our money, which is priorities. Like I mentioned, look at how much of our budget, this is our general fund budget, goes to public safety and legal. So it's like 78% of our general fund budget. A very small amount goes to natural and economic environment, but we've got a great group, two of our staff people here today, so we make the most of it. And then I like to show, this is a North Tacoma home. Thought that might be relevant to the audience. I like to show people how little amount of your money goes to the county. This is a home in the city of Tacoma, so they're paying 6.7% of their property taxes to the county. If you live in an unincorporated area, you're probably paying a little over 8%. It's not very much, so we don't have a ton of money and we do a lot with it. All right, now we're into the environmental part. And I hope I'm not going to step on the toes of PPW, but this is super high level, and I know that they are going to be able to fill in a lot of the details. As you all know, Pierce County has a sustainability plan. The first one was in 2021. We update it every couple of years. It's very aggressive to reduce greenhouse gas emissions by 45% by 2030. I've listed here some of the contributing factors that you all know of: vehicles, internal combustion, heating of homes, commercial buildings. Some of these are big things that we're attacking along with the state. And then I wanted to highlight the name of our new Office of Resilience and Climate Action, the ORCA group. I think that was just brilliant. The County Council, we are not the experts in this area. You've got two of the experts here with us today. It's our goal and our job to keep the plan on track. We receive reports, I think twice a year, at least once a year, about how they are achieving their goals. We ask questions, and of course, we are there to provide whatever financial resources we can to move things forward, because this is definitely a priority of this council in particular. These are the areas of the focus of the plan. Again, energy and built environment, transportation, consumption, and waste reduction. We've got the new food waste program that PPW rolled out. You can compost everything basically by throwing it in your yard waste. We're really trying to get the word out about that. Carbon sequestration, I'm going to talk about as part of the comp plan. We are all over land conservation. You all know that's something that I care a lot about. I'm going to lock it up, lock that land up, so that, because when it's gone, it's gone. So I'm always trying to do that. And then education and outreach. Our Planning and Public Works Department does a great job. And I am very encouraging of more efforts, especially in regards to litter, which is a big deal and also bad for our environment. So land conservation is a big deal for me. If you guys have heard of the Conservation Futures Program, we've conserved over 5,000 acres. District 7, Gig Harbor and the Key Peninsula, but you can see in Tacoma too has done really well in this program. We've got some great groups like Great Peninsula Conservancy and the Nisqually Land Fund or Nisqually Land Trust, Penn Met, Key Penn Parks. They go after these dollars, and they've been able to conserve a lot of land forever and ever and ever, which is great. So I'm here to talk about the comprehensive plan. I lead the Community Development and Environment Committee. So we were in charge of the comprehensive plan last year in terms of the council. PPW staff, our planners, have been working hard for years on this plan, but it started moving through council really last year, and we had to pass it by the end of the year. What we did was the higher level policies, although they're fairly specific. We wanted to make sure that we gave PPW good direction on policies so that when we get the implementing regulations, which we do have now, and they're going to be coming through my committee on June 2nd, and then to final, I think June 9th or 16th, I'd have to look. I think it's in the slide. That's where the rubber meets the road, and that's when developments, this is really important, developments, once we pass implementing regulations, they can't vest under the old rules. So I have been really anxious to get this done. Here on this slide are all of the things that we look at in the comprehensive plan. It's all about planning for growth. And you probably know that Pierce County is the poster child for Growth Management Act. And we are why growth management came to be, because we were just sprawling everywhere. Growth management is meant to reduce sprawl, put people where people belong, where we can best serve them and we can afford to serve them, keep rural areas rural, wild lands wild. And all of these things, all of these factors here play into that. But land use is the biggest, but they all interrelate. So this talks about the different levels. We've got the Growth Management Act. Then we've got Vision 2050, which is the Puget Sound Regional Council, the big counties out here in Western Washington. Then we've got our countywide planning policies, and then our comp plan. We all have to be in line with the plans above us. So there's some things that we really don't have any choice about. Fortunately, I will say I like the Growth Management Act, and I'm glad that I can be like, oh, I'm sorry, we have to be in compliance with the Growth Management Act. And I will, sometimes use that not as an excuse when I'm talking to developers, but I mean, whether I want to or not, we have to be in compliance with the Growth Management Act. And then down below the comp plan are community plans. In Gig Harbor, we have a Land Use Advisory Council. Key Peninsula has one. And then there's a variety in other parts of the county too. So we really like to give local areas as much autonomy as possible. They know their communities, but they can't do just anything they want. They still have to be in line with our plan. So it's really important, like I think Lucinda said earlier about 139S, that we have lots of community feedback. The department has done a great job postcarding and tabling and surveys, and they've been at events since 2021, really gathering a lot of input. We passed it at the end of last year. The executive signed it. Executive Mello signed it early this year, and now you can see, there you go, June 2nd in our committee. Final June 10th. That's our goal. I can't guarantee it, but believe me, I am pushing for it because I wanted it done like 3 months ago. This talks a little bit about kind of our plan. So one of the overarching things that we have to meet are the population goals. Population goals in cities. The cities have a goal, and then we have a goal for our urban areas, our county urban unincorporated areas, and then in our rural areas. So Department of Commerce at the state level actually gives us those numbers. There is not much negotiation. There was a little negotiation, a little arguing over the formulas, but at the end of the day, they give us the number, and then we have to figure out from our land use policies, our zoning policies, how we're going to either put a bunch more houses in one area and a bunch less houses in another area.
I might interject that this is not that we're recruiting people to come here. We know they're coming here.
They are coming here. You can see the projected growth is like 250,000 people over the next 10 years. So we've got to plan on where to put them, because otherwise, people just sprawl everywhere. So we take a really good look. We talk with our cities and towns. We think about transit opportunities. We think about our environment, wetlands, flood zones, all of that. And then we figure out where we're going to allow housing. And we're really focused on making sure that we're putting our densest housing, and it's pretty darn dense, in high capacity transit areas. And you will see on this map, those areas are the areas in orange. So if you're in Gig Harbor and Key Peninsula, we don't have any of those areas out here. We do have some of the gray areas. Those are urban growth areas. And actually this map might be a little bit old. It doesn't reflect what we took away, but I'll show you that in a minute. So that has regular urban density, which is like 4 to 6 units an acre, which is really not a lot. I mean, you think of 4 units per acre, that's quarter-acre lots, right? So you could do a little bit more than that potentially. Those orange, we're talking like 24 to 80 units an acre. We're talking about tall buildings, lots of housing, but again, lots of infrastructure, high capacity transit, lights, sidewalks, parks, really making these really good places for people to live. Okay, so UGA retractions. This is something that I worked really hard on. We ended up removing about 800 acres from the UGA throughout Pierce County. We wanted to do a whole lot more than that, but when we got down to it, we had smaller cities, for example, not Gig Harbor, but other parts of the county that were like, this is our only UGA, we need it, because that's the only place we can put higher density housing and more affordable housing. So they had different reasons. We tried to respect the cities almost always. If we thought it was getting a little ridiculous, we might give them a little bit, but take more away someplace else. But we ended up reducing the UGAs by 800 acres. 400 of that was around Gig Harbor. So I listened to our city of Gig Harbor. I listened to our residents. We are not going to have high capacity transit ever, probably out here. So we were able to get the whole Purdy area away. The city was great to work with, and whew, that was probably one of the biggest things that I will do during my time here, is especially getting Purdy out of the UGA. Okay, so major environmental wins from the comp plan. I mentioned the UGA reductions. We eliminated the rural bonus density. That thing should have been eliminated like 20 years ago. It basically allowed people to double the number of units they could put on their lot if they were zoned R10, but they had at least like 7.5 acres, they could put 2 homes instead of 1. And obviously you're only supposed to put 1. There was all these bonus. Anyway, it was very, very complicated, but it basically doubled the number of homes that we could have in the rural area. We got rid of it. That was extremely contentious. And so we were very excited about that. We talked about getting rid of the R5 designation and making R5 R10. In the end, that was probably an area of compromise. We left in what is R5 could stay R5, but nothing else could ever be R5. So we would not expand that anywhere else. So that was good. We reduced zoning around flood risk areas, which just seems like a no-brainer. We committed to conserving over 100,000 acres. That's going to include ag land and like working forests. And I don't know if it's going to include any tidelands or not, but we're really working hard with some land trusts to make that happen. We're updating our transfer of development right program, which is very complicated, but where somebody with some land can sell the development rights to somebody in a more urbanized area that wants to develop more. So it's great. It's conserving what we want to conserve and developing more where we want to develop more. We put in a ton of policy about EV infrastructure, about warehouses, not using the word warehouses, but to really keep an eye on where we're putting large buildings with lots of impervious surface over aquifers, especially in areas where people are living, because that's not good for health outcomes. We talked about good jobs, good union jobs, good green jobs, really being intentional about going after those kinds of companies, because Tacoma should be attracting those kind of companies, as should Pierce County. And then we talked about urban tree coverage of 40% in our urban areas. But every element of the comp plan talks about climate change and talks about protecting our environment. So we're very proud of that. Of course, we got to put people somewhere. We can't just keep all of our land for our trees and our bears and our cougars and our coyotes. So I talked about how we put people in the transit-oriented development areas. You think about Midland, Spanaway, Frederickson, that type of area. And we streamlined development in those areas. We really simplified all the different kinds of zones that we have to make it easier for developers to develop where we want them to develop. We did a lot with pedestrian active transportation, encouraging biking and walking. And we're going to be looking at short-term rentals because we know there's some positives and there's some negatives, and everybody can get a little regulation so that we can protect our communities. As part of the comprehensive plan, we updated our critical area ordinance. This is all about protecting our environment. We did a lot of work, especially with wetlands and fish and wildlife habitat conservation areas, using new science, the current best available science, and mitigation sequencing. So this is going to be the big impact on developers, where number one, we're going to work with them to avoid impacts at all. And that may be, okay, why don't you move your houses over here? Why don't you move your houses closer together so it's further away from this wetland or this type F stream, for example? If they can't, and to be honest, I'm a little muddy on the details here, but we're going to work through this progression about mitigating the impacts of whatever they're doing. And the goal is to be as early in this chart as possible to make sure that there is no net loss. The critical area ordinance, so I just mentioned all of this. One of the things that Lucinda, you guys here in Gig Harbor might be interested in is increased buffers to our streams. And I put over here on the left part of the slide some of the type F streams. The whole stream may not be type F, it may be just parts of the stream. They're larger streams, but not quite shorelines. So it's kind of a mix of mid-sized streams. But these are all of the ones like in our area. So I thought that was really interesting. Oops. Hold on. Okay, Shoreline Master Program. We did a very limited update. Shoreline Master Program is tough because it's not only about protecting our shoreline, but it's also about managing development in our shoreline, bulkheads and docks and piers and things. So some of these things, aquaculture, some of these things compete a lot. And the Department of Ecology has to approve whatever we do. So to be honest, we tried to slip some things through and they caught us. So some of the things we wanted to do got through. Other things we're going to have to keep trying. We have a full shoreline master program update in 2029, which just feels like forever away, but we're going to keep really trying to build the case so that we can have more protective shoreline obligations. But at the very least, one thing we did was to make sure that our development regulations in the shoreline were at least as protective as what we have in the uplands, which are covered by the critical area ordinance. I mean, that just is a no-brainer, but we made sure that that happened. Hot environmental topics to come. I mentioned the implementing regulations. We have passed the policy, but I have no doubt that we will be arguing it all over again when we actually have these development regulations coming. So I might be calling on some of you guys if you're interested in testifying. The land conservation plan, we've got some folks on council that are not super excited about pulling land off of the tax rolls, even though there's such a great benefit with carbon sequestration and habitat. So that'll be a hot one. We really want to work on 6 PPD. PFAS is terrifying. Our aquifers, we want to make sure they're healthy, and we want to get a handle on what we have and how much we have and where. Large impervious surfaces, I mentioned the warehouses, aquaculture, carbon-friendly forest management. That's fascinating stuff. So we want to make sure we're managing our forests and having longer grow times and all of the science-based things that we know. And that is it. So I would really appreciate you guys and your interest and how you educate folks on this. We've got so many boards and commissions, and we're so active in this. If you want to be more involved, reach out and make sure you're you know what's going on. And because constituents are just so important. Your voice is way more important than ours. So we really appreciate whenever you want to engage. I'm happy to take questions, or I can wait till the other speakers are done.
Yeah, maybe are there any questions about this at the government county level of planning land use? And some people may not be as familiar with the acronym PPW, but that's the department at the county that does takes care of the regulations, all the development applications, and departments that we're going to hear from now, the ORCA. One of the great things that I noticed in this last week is we have the League of Women Voters did a study in 2011 on biodiversity in land use in Pierce County. What do we have on the books? What do different groups want to do with land use planning and so on? And it's a pretty in-depth study, I must say myself, because I was part of the committee that did this. And when I look back on that, the difference between then, which was in 2011, and now in 2025, with the 2025 brand new comp plan that was just signed by our county exec, is marvelous. We have made wonderful progress in making the natural world, the non-human part of our county protected, and it's phenomenal. If you don't know how to use your little raise hand button, you can also just wave your hand and be glad to notice anybody. And Teresa.
Lucinda, there is a hand up, but if Robin could take the screen share down, it would be easier to see.
Okay.
Thank you.
No worries.
So thank you, Robin. I haven't heard you talk about this particular topic before, and so I want to raise an issue. You talked about the tension between good things, and I know that Gig Harbor has a particular problem with low-income housing. That you have like 22% of the folks are low-income households, and you only have 9% housing that would be affordable for those folks. And I know that it is important to pay attention to density, but also one of the ways that Tacoma creates low-income housing is through some density. And that tends to be where you can find inexpensive housing. So how do you work that out, or do you have a plan?
Yep, we do. And that's really probably best answered by the city of Gig Harbor. But I can tell you that the Department of Commerce, with their new guidelines for the comprehensive plan, has the county and each city making sure that we have enough housing per income band. So Teresa, to your point, Gig Harbor, and I don't know what the number is, but they have to have a certain amount of lower income housing affordable to lower income populations. And you're right, they don't have nearly enough, but to their credit, they are really working on it. So they are figuring out areas of town where they can have more dense housing. If you know the community like North Gig Harbor, we've got some apartments, Target and Costco and stuff. They're working with developers to figure out how we can build either housing dense enough that it is naturally affordable, but also actually there's some things in a lawsuit we did a couple of years ago that obligates a certain percentage be affordable. So they are figuring it out with their zoning, either by densifying more or by programs like the main multifamily tax exemption program, where they'll give a deal to developers to do a certain percentage of affordable housing.
For 6 to 12 years. So that's not really a solution. But I think what I'm talking about is that I get the desire to shrink down the places where density can happen. But when you do that, there's an obvious impact that if you're trying to build something inexpensively, you have fewer options. And so it's going to be more expensive to do. That's just a trade-off.
Yeah, it is. But again, we're obligated to figure that out. Now, at the county level, we have the whole county to figure it out. So we're figuring it out, maybe not right in Gig Harbor. We're figuring it out in Midland, Spanaway, Parkland, Frederickson, the high capacity transit areas. Gig Harbor has got to figure it out in the city of Gig Harbor because they have their own income bands that they need to accommodate. So in our urban growth areas around Gig Harbor, I mean, there may not be a lot of affordable housing, but Gig Harbor itself will have to come up with its own way of reaching those income targets. So that's good.
Thank you.
Thank you. And Linda has a question?
Yeah, I did have a question. So you mentioned some of that conservation land would be agriculture land. I just wondered if you have any built-in incentives for regenerative agriculture?
I don't know what regenerative agriculture is.
So regenerative agriculture is no-till and cover crops that also helps with carbon sequestration.
Awesome. I don't think we've gotten specific about the kinds of agriculture that we are working on conserving, but when we talk about conservation, we're talking about conservation like agricultural conservation easements. So this land will be in agriculture forever. And I was on the Conservation Futures Board for a number of years. And I will tell you that a lot of the farms that we went to were organic, were like definitely doing things in a natural way. So I can also tell you those kind of farms would score very highly. So it's probably going to be happening just because they're going to be the ones that go to the top of the list when we're looking at farms where we can pay them to stay farms forever. But that's a good point, and I will definitely keep that in mind if there's ways to incentivize, and we want to support those kind of farms, obviously.
Yeah.
And that's what the business of Pierce Conservation District, which isn't planning, but they definitely encourage that kind of farming and show farmers how to do it. Yep.
Yeah, they are awesome.
Then maybe let's there probably will be questions at the end as well, but let's go to Nicole. If you and Eurydice would like to present your pieces of what ORCA is doing.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. Let me get my screen shared here. All right. So I'm sure y'all will have lots of questions, which is great. Just want to note that Eurydice and I don't work a whole lot really on comprehensive planning or with our land conservation plan. So we'd be happy to pass along any questions, do our best to answer your questions. Mostly what we're here to do today is kind of give an overview of that Sustainability 2030 greenhouse gas reduction plan and a little bit of the background of the land conservation plan because it originated from the Sustainability 2030 plan and kind of with land use, how we work on it is through a lens of greenhouse gas reduction. So that's kind of why we'll just give a high level overview of the plan. Eurydice, feel free to jump in whenever. So we are, as Lucinda said, we are the new Office of Resilience and Climate Action. We used to be called Sustainable Resources, and I can give a little bit of background as to why we have a new name change. So with the restructuring that the new executive has done in the county within Planning and Public Works, we have added a new kind of natural resources team. So we are now a Sustainability 2030 plan team. We continue to have a team of really amazing environmental educators. And then now we have this new addition of this natural resources team, which is really going to help us focus on nature-based climate solutions and working to connect agriculture and forests and salmon to the work of greenhouse gas reduction, as well as climate resilience. So in years prior, our Sustainability 2030 plan was really mainly focused on reducing greenhouse gas emissions. And I'll talk a little bit more about this later, but we are updating the plan and there is a lot more of a focus in this year's update for climate resilience. So it's really exciting to have a new team of people to be able to do this work because every time we update the plan, or at least the last 2 times that we've updated the plan, we hear a lot of community feedback that our community members are experiencing the impacts of climate change right now. And so we really need that adaptation and climate resilience work to be happening. So we're excited to do that. And with the addition of this new natural resources team, we get to collaborate more with people in parks or in our surface water management and our long range division planning. So it's really exciting to be able to work cross departmentally even more now. All right, so Councilmember Denson did introduce our Sustainability 2030 plan, so I'll just go over a few more things. Again, it was developed in 2020, signed by the then county executive in 2021, and then the county council asked us to update this plan every 2 years. So it was updated in 2023, and we are currently in the process of updating it right now for 2025. And as Councilmember Denson said, the overall goal of this plan is to reduce greenhouse gas emissions by 45% by the year 2030. And in order to, know where to focus our efforts, we wanted to understand where our emissions were coming from in Pierce County. So we hired a consultant to do a greenhouse gas inventory, and these are the results that you're seeing up on the screen on the left. So the biggest chunk of greenhouse gas emissions in Pierce County is coming from our buildings and sources of energy. So, heating, cooling our buildings with natural gas. The second largest contributor is through transportation, and that's actually mostly people driving alone in their vehicles. And then the third largest, which I think is of the most relevant topic today, is through land use. And this was a new area that we looked at in this 2019 greenhouse gas inventory. So 27% of our greenhouse gas emissions was coming from the developing of natural lands. And then 2 smaller categories, refrigerants and wastewater, were both at 4%. And so we have this greenhouse gas inventory for both Pierce County as a community, countywide, and then also Pierce County as an entity, as an organization. And so we have 2 separate kind of plans to reduce greenhouse gas emissions for both the county and Pierce County as an entity. So our plan focus areas really reflect where our greenhouse gas emissions are coming from in Pierce County. So we have actions structured into these 6 main buckets for our community-wide emissions. So around energy and buildings, around transportation, waste reduction, nature-based climate solutions, and then these last 2 are the ones that I get to focus on the most. So if you think, I'm going to try to explain this, but if you think about the energy and built environment, transportation, waste reduction, nature-based climate solutions as, bars on a graph of that's where our greenhouse gas emissions are coming from, and we have actions within each of those to reduce emissions. Our education and outreach and growing community capacity are kind of at the foundation. They go across all of those actions. We really need our community. We need to educate our community about the actions that we can take, that they can take individually, but also together as a community. And we also need to invest in our own community's capacity to get involved in this work. So I really think of those last 2 focus areas as kind of the foundation for doing the work. And then for municipal actions, so for our own internal county emissions, we're looking at our county buildings and fleet, reducing employee commutes, our county waste system, and looking at improving our employee education and equitable practices. All right. So, Eurydice, I don't know if you wanted to speak to the energy and transportation, or I don't mind continue to keep talking about these.
Yeah, so we've identified the largest greenhouse gas emissions reduction opportunities. I do work on energy and built environment actions in our plan, electrifying new and existing buildings, reducing energy use through weatherization and efficient appliances, and increasing local solar and other renewables are the 3 largest buckets. And Nicole, I've got some concern that we're not going to get through a lot of our slides. I know we have one more speaker and we have a hard stop at 8. Is that right, Lucinda?
I don't know whether it's a hard stop or not. That's up to Cynthia, but yeah, we'll try to wrap it up for as best we can. But go ahead and with your.
We'll keep going. Yeah. Next slide, Nicole, and I might just go very quickly through these, and then this slideshow will also be available to your members after this. So some of these, Councilmember Denson touched on the opportunities for reducing emissions. These are some of the examples. Electrifying our vehicles, but more importantly, increasing bicycle and pedestrian infrastructure so that we have ways to get around without using cars. Next slide. Waste reduction is very important. It is just a small percentage of our greenhouse gas emissions inventory, but it's something that we all can take action on, especially reducing our food and organic waste by meal planning and then composting our food scraps. Next slide. Nature-based solutions connects most directly to this question of why biodiversity is important to climate change, protecting and planting trees, conserving and restoring natural lands, reducing food and organic waste, and then increasing housing density in urban areas so that we're not converting open land or forest land to paved or roofed areas. And the next slide. Nicole, do you want to speak to the education?
Sure. Yeah, thanks, Eurydice. As I said earlier, I focus mostly on this section along with our environmental educators, and we focus on collaborations with different cities, towns, and tribes throughout Pierce County. We're really trying to increase not just like the education that we're putting out there, but also increase the civic engagement opportunities that our community members can get involved in. And then also supporting youth and teachers in climate action. And then our last section, so this one is new from our 2023 update, which I am personally very excited about, which I mentioned earlier is all about investing in our community's capacity to get involved in this work. So kind of internally for us, that looks like making sure that our community's existing priorities are connected within our Sustainability 2030 plan. And fostering community leadership, increasing connections to nature, and then improving government-to-government relationships with tribes. And I'm thinking about the land acknowledgements that you all shared, and that tribes have legal rights to the cultural resources across Pierce County. And so I think by implementing this plan, we're striving to ensure that tribes continue to have access to the clean air, clean water that contribute to the health of those cultural resources. And just real quick, I'll talk about the 2025 update, which is essentially we're building a work plan for 2026 and 2027. Again, like Eurydice mentioned, you'll get a copy of these slides, so you can visit this webpage to learn more about the update. Here's our timeline. We first started with engagement, which focused on having conversations with different community-based organizations. We did a more broader public engagement period with the survey and social media. We even engaged our own internal county colleagues. Right now, we're in the middle of making plan revisions. And then in June, we will share a draft plan, and we'll open that up to public comment, finalize the plan, present it to the county council, and then hopefully the plan will go into effect in January of 2026. And just real quick, this is a feedback of some of the community a screenshot of some of the feedback that we've been seeing and hearing. Again, we've really been hearing a lot about concerns for the existing climate impacts in Pierce County. We continue to hear that access to parks and green spaces is of high concern. We consistently hear about the need for public transit and better active transportation infrastructure, especially in unincorporated Pierce County. And one of the newer kind of themes that emerged from our community engagement for this update was that community-based organizations want and need more funding and capacity, and they want to be involved in this work. And so they need support from the county to do so. So just to showcase and give thanks to the community organizations that gave feedback and were involved in our community dialogues or our interviews, who helped shape a lot of the actions in our plan. These were, again, some of the themes very similar to that last slide, but these were more so tailored to those organizations that were involved in those more like one-on-one interviews. So for our 2025 updated plan, we have a lot of actions that we'll continue to work on: climate education and outreach, active transportation and transit, electrifying and weatherizing homes, developing climate leaders, increasing access to electric vehicles and alternative commutes, and increasing green stormwater infrastructure and habitat restoration. But there will also be a bigger emphasis on land conservation, on climate resilience, expanding partnerships, and urban forestry, agriculture, and habitat restoration, and a bigger focus as well on green economy and green job pathways. Right.
Okay, great. So now we're going to talk about biodiversity, the topic that you're especially interested in. And I am not an expert, but I'll do my best. We've got an important tool that is coming to Pierce County, a new nature-based climate solution. The land conservation plan has been worked on by my team, members of my team, and many partners over approximately the last 2 years. It's in final draft form now, and it will be reviewed by Pierce County Council's Community Development and Environment Committee on June 16th, I think, and then hopefully be on its way to full council adoption after that. Okay, next slide. So the big picture: conserving land reduces greenhouse gas emissions because carbon stays stored in vegetation and soils, and natural lands continue to absorb carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. Natural lands like forests, wetlands, and shorelines are ideally balanced systems with many kinds of plants and animals interacting with one another in sustainable and ongoing ways. This biodiversity with many kinds of plants and animals, it keeps the systems functioning, cleaning and filtering water, absorbing carbon dioxide, and providing cultural resources to tribal nations. So in the big picture, conserving land is essential to meet the county's greenhouse gas emissions reduction goal. They also provide many other ecosystem services, preserving biodiversity and keeping the ecosystems balanced, protecting air and water quality, and addressing increasing extreme heat. The Land Conservation Plan is built on collaboration and active engagement. Partners brought many different approaches and funding opportunities to the table. And it will provide a toolkit of conservation strategies that can be used by the county, but also by our partner organizations. Next slide. Yeah, so protecting biodiversity is one of the guiding principles of the Land Conservation Plan. These are some of the ways that biodiversity shows up in the plan. We undertook to map priority conservation areas using GIS tools to identify high conservation value areas based on their habitat quality, species diversity, and ecological importance. Habitat connectivity, where lands that link fragmented habitats so that animals can migrate and maintain ecological resilience, especially in the face of climate change with changing temperatures, changing rainfall patterns. Habitat connectivity is increasingly important. Protecting key ecosystems, this prioritizes critical environments like the nearshore, shorelines, marine areas, and also prairies. These are key ecosystems. They're home to rare and endangered species. They are part of the puzzle of keeping salmon runs alive. And finally, cultural and ecological integration. The land conservation speaks to collaboration with tribal nations to preserve those culturally significant species that occur all over Pierce County, the prairies, the waterways, and respect their existing treaty rights. Okay, the next slide. So this has been a long process. In 2021, we adopted the goal of reducing emissions 45% by 2030, and recognized from the inventory that 27% of the emissions come from tree loss. And the council directed that we adopted a land conservation plan in 2023, and in 2024, there was extensive collaboration with tribes, conservation organizations, and many other partners. And this year, we're hopeful that the Land Conservation Plan will be adopted by the County Council, and these tools that have come out of the work of the Land Conservation Plan will be available for the county and for other partners to identify priority lands, secure funding, and continue to foster partnerships. And it will be updated every 5 years. Okay, next slide. Guiding principles of the Land Conservation Plan. Protecting biodiversity and habitat connectivity, as I already mentioned, is one of the key guiding principles, as these others: engaging with tribes, sequestering carbon, enhancing ecosystem services, and centering equity, in addition to designing for economic resilience. Next slide. There are 6 land categories identified in the Land Conservation Plan. Each of those has unique benefits that they offer. The nearshore and marine shorelines protect biodiversity, water quality, and critical marine habitats. Prairies are the key ecosystems. They're rare. Many of them in Pierce County have been converted over the decades to development due to being flat. But they do have ecosystem services. Even without forests, the soils there can absorb carbon dioxide. They are an important part of our natural land systems. It's not just forests that can be carbon sinks, but soil on prairies as well as wetlands. Farmlands are productive agricultural lands, and in addition to supporting the rural economy, they can also be an important source of sequestering carbon. Urban green spaces increase active recreation for residents, improve air quality, and they address the urban heat island impact. So trees in urban spaces can keep our cities much cooler than they otherwise would be. And everyone probably on this call understands how the forests are some of the most carbon dense, carbon sequestrating sinks in the world. And floodplains and aquatic corridors are another land category that is important for reducing our resilience to floods and enhancing aquatic ecosystem health. Next slide. Okay, so Councilmember Denson mentioned some of these conservation strategies for land, and these are all in the land conservation plan. These are different mechanisms. Some are long-term, some are short-term. And the land conservation plan is going to be the best place to learn about these in detail. As far as the conservation transaction actions, we also have the tool of regulation and incentives, the policies to prevent habitat destruction, and incentives for private landowners to conserve the biodiversity that exists on their own land. And then a very important strategy is partnering with tribal nations, non-governmental organizations, and other community partners in the effort to conserve additional lands. Next slide. So the land conservation plan goes a long way towards identifying priority lands for conservation in Pierce County. These are the categories: protected lands, map lands that are already under protection, and it's important that we continue to keep them protected, and also helps identify gaps and connect existing protected areas. There will be, I think there's a map tool that all of these 5 categories, you'll be able to take a look at them, and they will overlay with the biodiversity and habitats for threatened and endangered species, identifying lands that are critical for habitat connectivity and wildlife conservation. Development pressures that integrates zoning data and urban growth boundaries, IDs areas at high risk of development, the carbon and climate, those priority lands, evaluates those for their carbon sequestration potential and how much carbon they can sequester. The equity index considers socioeconomic and environmental equity factors, and it prioritizes urban green spaces in underserved communities in Pierce County. Okay, next slide. Okay, some important success stories include Solar Farm, the Nisqually Community Forest, and McDermott Point. And I am not familiar with any of these, but I could read from my notes. I'd rather just go on to the next slide, and probably some people on this call know more about them than I do. So I want to get to questions if people have them. Yeah, great. So next steps for land conservation in Pierce County: identifying and securing funding. That's really one of the main important steps. Developing an urban forest strategy is in our next several years work plan. Collaborating on salmon habitat restoration with tribal partners and landowners all around the county. Improving the transfer of development rights program that Councilmember Denson mentioned, partnering with other entities on large-scale forest conservation projects. There is still work to do mapping the remaining prairie land in Pierce County. Planning and Public Works does plan to hire an urban forestry planner. That staff member will be likely spearheading developing an urban forestry strategy, and the plan will continue to be updated after it is adopted every 5 years. Okay, next slide. Yeah, so as Councilmember Denson mentioned, the Shoreline Master Program will be updated in 2029. This gives a little bit of a background on the Shoreline Management Act. It does protect development along all of our shoreline, and it balances environmental protection with the value of public being able to access our shorelines. And it does apply within 200 feet of all marine waters and certain rivers, streams, and lakes. So it's not just marine waters. Local shoreline master programs establish regulations to manage shoreline development and environmental protection. Next slide. So there are 4 important conservation strategies for shorelines, critical habitat protection, and shorelines are unique and different from forests and the same. Preserving ecologically sensitive areas on shorelines includes wetlands, estuaries, where the rivers meet the marine waters, and riparian zones. Those are the plants and trees and vegetation that are along the water. Prevents habitat fragmentation to support species migration and breeding. And let's see, another important strategy is shoreline development regulations, regulating development in shoreline areas to preserve ecological function, promoting restoration. This includes things like considering things that would intrude over water and shade places that fish can lay their eggs in, for example, or barriers to the water coming in and taking away important beach space. It's a habitat for forage fish to lay their eggs in, and forage fish are an important species that salmon feed on, and it's part of that bigger ecosystem and the food web. It's really important for salmon in Pierce County and all around the Puget Sound. Another important conservation strategy is restoration and mitigation projects, replanting vegetation, pollution control along shorelines, having plants that are holding the soil in place and stopping pollutants from running down into the water, because a well-vegetated shoreline can much more easily absorb the pollutants, and so then they don't just go right into the water. Climate adaptation initiative strategies include addressing sea level rise. Coastal squeeze is the sea level rise coming up to the development, making the beaches smaller. We have also heard during our community dialogues for a Sustainability 2030 plan that residents that live near shorelines are concerned about saltwater intrusion to their freshwater systems, and that's definitely going to be a concern in the coming decades. Okay, next slide. Okay, there's a summary of the Shoreline Master Program 2029 update. And next slide, please. Be able to read the Q&A, and I am mindful of the last speaker.
Okay, I don't know if there are any questions, or you can wave or raise your hand. Oh, Nancy, go ahead.
When you were talking about the plans coming up and what's going to be happening in the various different groups that county has collaborated with and planned to, I didn't hear anything about schools, school districts. Is that in the works, or does that just not work out to work with them if they have their own programs or something?
We work very closely with schools. So we went through it very, very quickly, but within the education and outreach section of our plan, we have 2 separate actions that identify the need to work with youth to increase opportunities for youth to get involved in climate action. So for example, one of our environmental educators is working on a youth film festival with a youth planning team. So this event is put on by youth across Pierce County. It's happening June 1st. I can put some more information in the chat. And then this environmental education team also works with teachers and schools to increase that climate change education in schools. And then we are hoping to focus more in this 2025 plan update on this like more school district approach for like increasing that like school garden and like school grounds restoration piece. So definitely a lot of stuff happening with schools and teachers and youth across Pierce County.
Excellent. Carol.
Hi, has your group or maybe for, I wonder if the county council group, are you coordinating with conserving the open lands that are still on Joint Base Lewis McChord? Because they're a huge property owner in Pierce County. And they've got a pond creek system out there, including wetlands. They have old farms that have gone back to nature. They have forests that are not old growth, I'm pretty sure, but maybe secondary growth. And it is just a treasure trove of biological diversity out there.
Nicole?
Let's see, let me share what I know. I also know that Joint Base Lewis McChord is, has a lot of prairie land as well. So I don't know if a lot of people know that. And I will say we have a story map that will be publicly available very soon. And when it is, we'll share that with you because it's a really amazing tool. But in terms of having them on as like a formal collaborator, I'm trying to recall because we had one of our teammates who was the point person for coordinating all this. I can't remember if they were a partner or not. I'm not sure. You were to see if you're recalling.
Yeah, I'm not recalling that they were a formal part of the team working on the land conservation plan. We do participate in a sustainability collaborative group. We convene that, and Joint Base Lewis McChord staff members do attend that. This is for staff that are working on environmental planning, so we have some ties with them. But it's, yeah, more to do for sure.
I love that you brought that up though, and especially because Pierce County has lost so much of its prairie and we don't want to lose any more. So we'll do more on that. Thank you, Carol.
Yeah, when we're talking about that 30 by 30 goal, so 30%, we have different jurisdictions within Pierce County, and definitely the bases, the national forests and the state forests are not really, different jurisdictions. And the whole land use thing is a Rubik's Cube of interests and jurisdictions that makes, just from our starting point of biodiversity needs protections and conservation. Well, okay, so there are going to be lots of barriers to that kind of, to our priorities. Other people are going to have different priorities, perhaps. The cool thing about the 2025 comp plan is that it did have within its general goals and policies was to protect 100,000 acres and managed for biodiversity. And that is part of this 30% that we can talk about. The other part, and that I'm going to segue into our next presenter from National Wildlife, is what about privately owned lands? What can we as individuals do to make biodiversity conservation around us? And that's where certain groups have this mission for maintaining biodiversity. And I've lost our presenter. What happened to Naomi? Is she here?
I'm here.
Okay, so Naomi, the National Wildlife was a major funder, actually, of some of our stewardship work for biodiversity here in Crescent Creek watershed. And so I'd like, go ahead with your presentation, and then we'll have some more questions and answers after that.
Okay, sounds good. I'm going to share my screen and hey, can everybody see that?
There you go.
Oh, yeah, you can see it?
Yep, we can.
And you don't see my notes? Okay. All right. So Good evening. My name is Naomi Alhadeff. And you got very close, Lucinda. But I work for the National Wildlife Federation, so I'll do the best I can for what's going on in Pierce County. Normally, Courtney Sullivan would be here, but it's her godson's high school graduation, and we just can't pass those up. So Courtney and I have been together for almost 8 years. I've been doing a lot of the same work. I lived in Washington for 6 years. I actually lived in Prosser, so if you're familiar with that, the other side of the state, I was there for a hot minute. So today we're going to explore how the National Wildlife Federation, or NWF, is advancing conservation efforts in the face of climate change. I'll sort of walk you through who we are, what we do, and how our programs are building a more resilient ecosystem. So I'm hoping that a lot of this will sound familiar, obviously, but also overlap with what's going on with the other two presenters and the work that they're doing, which sounds really great. So National Wildlife Federation is a broad and far-reaching organization. We have over 6 million members and 51 affiliate organizations across every U.S. state, Puerto Rico, and the Virgin Islands. But our strategic plan centers around a common agenda for wildlife. What this means and what it looks like is we're working to grow and protect America's fish and wildlife species and to help them adapt in a world that is changing very quickly, and especially due to climate change. And if you're not familiar, our mascot is a raccoon. So you'll see a lot of raccoon photos. Our work is wide-ranging. We focus on protecting and restoring wildlife populations and habitats, but we're also very active in climate change adaptation and management. So what this looks like is things like monitoring disease outbreaks and updating how we manage wildlife as those conditions shift. We produce we publish educational materials like the magazines. Our latest collaborative project documentary series was The Americas, which is out on NBC if you've had a chance to look at that, and help with restoration projects. And critically, we work with a lot of youth. So one of my main focuses here in Montana is working with our Garden for Wildlife program, which I'll get to a little bit later. But I also work with our Eco Schools program, which is to engage youth so the next generation is inspired to protect our natural world. What this results in, and so what we do is one of our major goals is to reverse the decline of wildlife populations. We do this through education, we do this through advocacy, and a lot of legislation as well. That means fighting to secure federal conservation funding, protecting key environmental laws like the Migratory Bird Treaty Act. I'll use a super relevant example. Right now, the Endangered Species Act is, dare I say, under attack. I will throw out the final comment period ends Monday if you haven't had a chance to do that. And pushing for new legislation such as the Great American Outdoors Act. We also work directly with species in trouble, red wolves, manatees, monarch butterflies, and more. And we work with our tribal partners to help them bring back bison onto the landscape. That's a really big topic here in Montana. Urban development, which has already been mentioned this evening, and climate change are fragmenting habitats at an alarming rate. This makes it harder for animals to find food, mates, or safe spaces to live. And one of the ways we work on that is by restoring natural habitats. And these efforts reconnect fragmented ecosystems and create pathways, or you've heard the term corridors, for wildlife so they can move and thrive in those locations. This also helps pollinators and other vulnerable species that are essential to our biodiversity. I'm just curious how many in this room garden or have some sort of natural space in your backyard. Yeah. And I do see a hand up, but I presume, Lucinda, do you want to take questions at the end or? Oh no, that was a hand raised like you were affirming. Okay. So these efforts reconnect fragmented ecosystems and create pathways for critters to move, but it helps pollinators, and this biodiversity is unbelievably important. if we head towards the monoculture, we start to really, I mean, we see problems. And regenerative agriculture has already been mentioned this evening. And I used to work I used to work for the Conservation District in Eastern Montana, in Eastern Washington. And we worked with a lot of farmers and ranchers on regenerative ag. One practical solution is climate smart gardening. So we encourage people to think about how changing their conditions, like how the changing conditions like stronger storms, more droughts and wildfires affect their landscapes. So choosing the right plants for your local condition and planting with sun, shade, and soil in mind makes a huge difference. It's all about building long-term resilience, starting right in our own backyards. So we want people to understand that their landscape, or just your balcony, or just your tiny front yard, can and should support wildlife in today's climate and the climate of the future. So climate smart yards don't just look good, they often use less water and are more self-sustaining. Using a mix of native plants that bloom in different seasons ensures there's always food and habitat available throughout the year. And we do have all kinds of resources on our website, which I'll get to again later. Healthy ecosystems are incredibly diverse. They're made up of thousands of interconnected species. So when people use native plants in your garden, you see an almost immediate boost in local wildlife. Even small changes have a big impact. Gardens start by attracting, so when you install your plants first, think of the native plants, and then after that you attract insects, that attracts birds, which then attracts mammals, and so on. And these critters all rely on the plants that you install, helping to increase the biodiversity in the entire neighborhood. So planting with a purpose. Native plants aren't just pretty, although we do have lots and lots of really pretty native plants. They provide food, shelter, and safe nesting places. They support pollinators like bees and butterflies, or native bees and butterflies. And importantly, they help feed birds. So 96% of songbirds rely on caterpillars. Those caterpillars in turn rely on native host plants. So without the plants, the whole food web can collapse. And it's like something like 95% of all mammals rely on a wetland at some point in their life cycle. So it's fascinating how much these plants that are important, or wetlands, or just, kind of swampy areas, are so critical to our biodiversity. So since 1973, we have had our Garden for Wildlife program that has helped people create habitat where you live, work, play, and learn. It's the largest and longest running native plant gardening program in the country. To date, we have over 316,000 certified wildlife habitat sites. These include schools, backyards, places of worship, community gardens, which I know we're going to get back to in Pierce County, also schoolyard habitats, and all of these places where people and wildlife can coexist. This is what the sign looks like, if anyone has one. So what's more, are these certified wildlife habitats have been studied by third-party independent researchers. The science shows that they significantly increase both the variety and the number of wildlife species you will see at your property. They also help fight climate change in their own way through resilience and carbon storage, giving people a direct way to take action. So we want everyone to feel empowered to make a difference, which is why we provide all of our resources on our website for free. Whether you have a backyard, a balcony, a garden, a schoolyard, a public space, there's always something that you can do. On the site, you'll find tips like tip sheets, native plant lists, project ideas to get started, and all of these efforts together will build a more climate resilient world, one teeny little garden at a time. But also, if you think of them as stopover sites, just like ducks, they can bounce from house to house in your neighborhood. So in Washington State, we're lucky enough to have Courtney Sullivan, who leads the local effort as a staffer. She's originally from Lacey, but she's now in Seattle. And since 2008, she's worked, I know, closely with Lucinda on the Habitat team, which I understand correctly, the Habitat team is at least a year older than that. Courtney's been on our team for a long time. So leading those efforts with the Crescent Valley and Pierce County. And so if you're in the area, she's the one to get in touch with. I can also put this in the chat later, Lucinda. And all with everything I've shared, and I know I went through kind of quickly to make sure you guys hit your time, but with everything we've shared, National Wildlife Federation has been around since 1936. We're the oldest and largest conservation organization in the country. From the very beginning, we've been bringing people together to ensure that wildlife not only survive, but thrive. So it's a mission that's very, very near and dear to my heart, and has become more urgent in the face of climate change. So I will stop there, and if there are any questions, I'm happy to answer.
When we did our study on biodiversity in Pierce County land use, we were looking at just conserving the natural world that we could see being bitten off through development in Pierce County, and did not discuss particularly climate change. So what does this all have to do with climate change? And I think Naomi did a good job of explaining how the actual existence of areas that are managed away from development for biodiversity are magnificent greenhouse gas and carbon sinks that do have an effect on mitigating some of the more severe effects of climate change. And so that's again why I brought this whole project in front of the league again, to notice the intimate link between the two. There's always going to be battles over how we use our land, and how we need affordable housing here, and how we need how we need parks there, and we need active recreation here for people, and all the things that people want, but they do want livability. And I think that is one of the many benefits that a biodiverse county can offer. Were there any questions you had for Naomi?
Rosemary has her hand.
I don't exactly have a question, but I was very excited when I heard both from Lucinda in the program planning and having you here, the National Wildlife Federation. I have a piece of property on the Key Peninsula that we've been trying to restore, and we have a certified wildlife placard up by the front of our property that says Wild Rose Sanctuary. And so that idea of how much good feeling while doing good things can happen when we meet each other on these places where the planning for big areas is important, as everyone has spoken tonight. These actions that actually connect us to the natural world in very specific ways do exactly, I think, what you said, Lucinda, about doing something when the times are hard. These are homegrown things that we can do. So I mostly wanted to thank both of you for doing that work.
Thank
Well,
you.
of course, I have lots more to say, but it is the hour, and probably preaching to the choir in any case. But
Carol has her hands up. I don't know if you see.
Oh,
I don't know if you saw Carol.
Go ahead.
I just put a quick link into chat where you can find, it's called Fast Democracy. You can find a summary of the bill, HR 1897. And Cynthia, can you send out a legislative alert for us to send emails, please?
That might be in the next voter. Are you perhaps suggesting our newsletter? That would be great. Yeah.
So Carol, if you write a little blurb and send it to Cynthia, that makes it even easier.
You're on, Teresa. Bet accepted.
Well, I'm
if I get stuck, I'll ask Robin for help.
I'm all into keeping those wildlife corridors open, and even, whether it's an urban area, suburban, or out into forestry lands and agricultural lands, there are ways we can help with this 30 by 30. So thank you very much to our speakers to give some very important parts of this Rubik's Cube of land use and our interest in maintaining the livability of this county.
Lucinda, Robin had her hand up.
Well, just real quick, because it's almost 8 o'clock. I just wanted to thank Naomi for bringing up the private landowner side, because there's only so much we can do. We can only buy so much big conservation land. I mean, we're doing as much as we can do, but so much of the land is privately held. So whether you own a small piece or a large piece, like Naomi said, what you do makes a big difference. We're also working with landowners, particularly on the KP, but in other areas of the county too, because most of our forest land is held by private individuals. And we're working with Washington State Extension Service. They're awesome. And these folks are super excited about being good stewards of their forest. So we're attacking it from like all sides too. And I think we have to. So thank you, Naomi.
Yeah, thank you for saying that. I really appreciate it. I think that can be a really important role that NGOs play, is to work with private landowners outside of the capacity that governmental or municipalities and federal government can play a role. I think all of those are tools in the same toolbox. As we've seen, the federal government's ability to manage what's going on right now is more at risk. That's all I'll say. So it's honestly at this point more reliant on on private land than it has been. It's still a great tool in the toolbox, but some states like Washington, more land is privately held than public. And there's only so much we can do on, say, Olympic National Forest, right? Versus, oh, you have 6 acres. That 6 acres could have more of an impact, not more than the park, but like that 6 acres could have more of an impact than 26 acres adjacent to Costco. And it all has to do with like thinking of like that checkerboard and where are things located and what is it you're doing on it. Are you spraying the heck out of it with weeds, or are you managing it with a thoughtfulness? Letting it go wild isn't always the best choice either, because we have all kinds of invasive plants. So I appreciate you saying that, but it comes down to HR bills and private lands and schools and getting everyone on the same, even just on the same conversation.
It's conversations, communities, networking, finding out about things. Our countywide planning policy, Naomi, posits it has a positive no net loss to ecosystem services that we have right now. Okay, how do we, how do we actually do that when it comes to regulations and applications for development and so on? And you're right. Right now at the Endangered Species Act, they're talking about ripping out the word harm, but that's what net loss is all about, is the harm that is done to our ecosystem. So that's again something you can testify, and the deadline is May 19th. Okay, let's get going.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.
It was great to hear the other
Thanks,
speakers. I
everybody.
really appreciate it.
That's lovely.
Thanks.